Then we get into RSO. Now, this is one that I have a near and dear place in my heart talking about because it's part of my entire story. It's arguably the reason that I really decided to dedicate my life to cannabis. And that is because of what I've witnessed with my own two eyes that I would have never believed if I did not with my own two eyes, right? And that is when I went to my cannabis school, at the same time I was going to school for psychology, I went to this cannabis institute. And this is in 2011. So this is like, back quite a while ago. And the owners of the school, they are amazing souls. And they had a lot of people coming in that were diagnosed with cancer. And so what they were doing and what they brought me into the know of is that cannabis will help you cure cancer, right? And this sounds like, oh, I knew the guy was going to say it's a panacea, blah, blah, blah. It's not a panacea, right? And I'll explain my dad's story to show you that it's not a panacea. But, really what happens is THC will kill cancer cells. CBD inhibits their growth. And you can look this up on PubMed. Now, they've only really done this, like at least the last time I checked a couple of months ago, I look every couple of months on PubMed, they've only isolated certain cannabinoids. So they're not even exercising the entourage effect, which in layman's terms basically means when everything's together the way nature intended it, it all works better. Everything helps one another work. So they're taking things in isolate and seeing these things happen. Now, again, what was happening for me is I'm in Boston. One of the best cancer institutes, arguably the best one in the entire country, Dana Farber, is here right in Boston. We have amazing medical centers. And so these people would be coming in to Mike and Melissa, the owners of the school, and they'd be showing their scans. I would see them like, oh yeah, stage 3, stage 4, metastasized, all these things. Then they would be getting administered RSO, right? They'd be getting RSO. They'd be going from...
RSO is Rick Simmons oil.
Yeah, Rick Simpson Oil. Yep, exactly. Rick Simpson. Yep. And so that's thank you for mentioning that. So the other name you might hear this referred to as is FECO, full extract cannabis oil. And I'll give some resources at the end for people to go diving into the rabbit hole about this too, because there's a lot of info.
They're in the syringe, right? Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Syringe. It's like a syringe without the needle. Yep. It's just that, and you can squirt it out. That's the best way because it's hard to work with. It literally is like resin. Like if anyone's done pipe resin, it looks like that, just like more
like Shilajit.
Exactly. That's the closest thing it's like. And that's the first time I ever saw Shilajit. I was like, very interesting, because they do look exactly alike. So I'd be seeing these people come in. They would then start holistic health practices. It's not just cannabis will cure your shitty lifestyle, right? But they would start implementing and taking themselves out of the situations that gave them cancer in the first place, stopping drinking, smoking, eating bad food, being in stressful environments, etc. And they would then start administering RSO. And a series of months later, they'd come back into the school with their scans that show nothing. And Dana Farber is puzzled, right? And they're asking them, what the hell did you do? And they're saying, we did cannabis. And they're like, no fucking way, right? It has to be something else. So I would see this with my own two eyes, right? So my father got diagnosed with cancer in 2014. And so I started administering him RSO. Now, my father was someone who was not going to stop smoking cigarettes, drinking Coca-Cola, eating steak and cheese subs, but he was the father that I loved. I've always loved him. He's amazing. And so I decided to just try to help him as much as I could. So his original termination date, I don't know what else to call it, was before Halloween. And he got diagnosed July 9th. Very aggressive small cell carcinoma. So I started feeding him RSO. And my dad was someone who never had gotten high, like maybe once in the 80s, but he had never gotten high. He did not like losing control at all. So with RSO, you want to get someone from a grain of rice sized up to a gram a day as quickly as possible. Now that is aggressive. Like RSO, for anyone who doesn't know what it is like the strongest form of cannabis on planet Earth, right? It's like, and you ingest it, right? So you eat it. So because it's getting metabolized through the liver, everything we talked about before is very pertinent. And so here's my dad trying to eat this cannabis oil and getting rocked, right? And so I didn't really get to get him up to as much as he was supposed to. He probably stayed around 0.2, 0.3. I had him on this for about 6 months, and his tumors were slowing their growth about 75 to 80%, right? They were still growing, but they were slowing their growth. So my father ended up passing the following June, right? So he almost lasted another like 8 or 9 months past when his date was. And I don't know if I would have had that time with him if it wasn't for cannabis. And so during that time, my father and I got to connect on levels that we had never connected to before. And, I'm an only child. I do have a stepbrother and stepsister, but in my, house, the way I grew up, and I'm an only child, I knew my dad, or so I thought, right? And so when I saw this softer version of him come out, this version of him that wasn't afraid of death, this version of him that, was so centered and so aware and so laughable and not serious, right? Like it just totally changed my whole perspective on what cannabis was for me and what my mission was in life in general. And that's what led me to get into the dispensary and do everything I'm ultimately doing now. So, our mess often becomes our mission, and so I think that goes over most of the different forms of ingestion. I'm trying to think if I forgot any. I think we got over everything. So yeah, you got all that stuff. If people want to look into RSO, look up Phoenix Tears. That's Rick Simpson's organization. There's, endless stories there from which to dive into. And you can also check PubMed as well if you're a science geek and you want to check that out, because I like that stuff too.
Okay. Thank you so much. I love it. It's very deep.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Very